Computer. All right,
Uh-oh.
glad to hear that. There we go. So we're going to begin in 1, 2, and 3. Well, good morning, everybody. This is Randy Weckerly, and we are honored to have two of the greatest human beings that I know join us and taking time out of their Sunday. We have Mr. Alwaz Carey, who, if you don't know Mr. Carey, you should get to know. Go to his website, Always.
Google me. Google me.
Always. He's Google you. You want to be
Yes.
Google?
Google
Okay.
me.
Google you. Or you can go to alwayscarey.com. He is a music philanthropist that he likes to let everybody know. He is a person that is very devout Christian that is really here to change the world in a lot of different ways. He has dedicated his life to giving rather than receiving. And his music paints a picture in the listener's mind of the harsh realities, yet the hope we have to change the picture and make dreams become reality, which is, I could sit and go on and on and on about Mr. Carey, but that says it in the simplest fashion, that it is a person that is here to give back and to change, give hope to those that need it, and to change the world by providing shelter, dedication, faith, and a lot of change worldwide. And there'll be a lot of that we're going to be bringing forward. He's a partner of mine in many, many different ways, but we are both hoping to provide love to the world through our organization called Mr. Carey, the Love Cottage, LLC. So it packages a lot of what we have all in one place. Also joining us is the gentleman who has put together the show, Things We Believe That Just Ain't So, Mr. Robert Mills. This is number 10 in a 10-part series. Mr. Mills also is from California. Both Mr. Carey and Mr. Mills reside, Mr. Carey in the LA area, Mr. Mills in the San Francisco area. And hopefully neither of those will become seashore new homes in the next years. Everything will remain intact. But happy here from the cabin up in Wisconsin as we get ready to move back to Illinois this coming week. And we're going to be talking about there's this little thing coming up in a week. Mr. Mills, just to remind you, is a person that has helped people in his past. He was a lawyer, consumer advocate, winning a lot of class action suits and protecting a lot of people and helping a lot of people in many, many different ways. He also does historical tours, many tours in San Francisco. And he also likes to climb mountains like the one that's behind him. And he has climbed about 56 of the tallest 57 mountains. Is that right, Robert?
Woo!
Yeah, it's crazy. And I have a hard time walking to the refrigerator, and he's out leaving tomorrow for another 3-day hike. And so anyway, let's get to what we're going to talk about today. One of the things that you hear that everybody knows is that probably the most important election upcoming that our country has been, well, I'll put it this way. I feel that it's one of the most critical elections that we have had, at least during my lifetime. And one of the reasons that we're on today is to talk about the Electoral College and the history of it, and why these swing states are important, and to share how it affects all three of us in many different ways. Hey, Always, what are you showing the camera down there? I didn't want to cut you short. Put that up there. Yeah, that is Mr. Carey is all about.
It's a Lion of Judah.
There you go. All right. And that is Mr. Carey, heart and soul. We have spent many hours in prayer together, and both of us hope that we leave a better footprint as we go forward in the world. Today's topic is going to be hopefully giving everybody that we have, and not only in our world, but in the United States, because we certainly affect that footprint around the world as a country. But the most important election that I believe has been in my history. And Mr. Mills, you've done some thinking about our Electoral College, and the foundational history of that. So today, the three of us will be sharing from our own perspectives, how it affects us today, and you're going to give us sort of an immediate uptake on what's that, Mr. Carey?
This is our rock from outer space. The we call it the love rock.
Really?
Yeah, it's a moon rock.
Really?
Officially, yeah.
That is interesting. Wow. Well, I hope it didn't hit you in the head as it came
Well,
back.
I look like I'm over there with Mr. Mills's backdrop.
Well,
It came off the mountain.
I tell you, he's got a fascinating. But anyway, Mr. Mills, let's get going on this topic of the Electoral College.
All right.
Proceed.
Viewers, we have an amazing podcast for you, so bear with us. There was been polls that came out this week. You probably saw them saying that 75% of the American electorate are very worried about the condition of American democracy. That's extraordinary. And my brother lives in Geneva, Switzerland. He travels all over Europe. And he says in the last week or so, every time he tells people he's an American, they start saying, what is going on over there? What's the matter with you guys? So what we're going to talk about in this podcast is how to get in this fine mess. Okay. How did America get in this fine mess? And it's not what you think. Okay. So bear with us. There's some interesting stuff here that we discovered in researching this and that you will learn from as we did about how America got into this fine mess. And there are 4 factors that I have identified, and I'll welcome my colleagues' points of view on this, but there's 4 that all together aggravate each other and are behind 90-some% of why we're in the condition and position that we are today. Okay, so I'll start out with the first one, and then I'll stop and we'll all talk about it. And that is something most people have never heard of, which is the Compromise of 1787. Okay, what the heck was that? Well, you remember that we won the American Revolutionary War, and we negotiated a peace treaty with England in 1781. And then we tried something called Articles of Confederation, in which the 13 colonies tried to govern themselves as the United States of America under this loose federation of 13 independent countries. It didn't work. It was a disaster. And so they got together in 1787 to try to come up with something that would be unite everybody as a real country. So they went to Philadelphia and sat around a table there. And originally, the proposal of the founders, the great Edmund Randolph of Virginia, the head of the delegation, and James Madison, some of the great founders, they proposed a democracy, which was the states would elect members of the House of Representatives and members of the Senate based on the number of voters in that state. And right before the convention, this group of slave owners in Virginia came in and forced them all aside and sent a delegation to Philadelphia. And they were freaked out that the New England delegation was anti-slavery, and they were worried about it. So they wanted much more than that. So they said, we're not going to sign this declaration, this Constitution, unless slaves are considered property. And we want that in the Constitution, like they're mules. And if they go across the line, and they were doing this, they were escaping, and the other states wouldn't send them back. You have to send them back. We want that in the Constitution. And we want them property for that purpose. We want them counted as persons for apportionment in terms of how many votes each state gets in Congress, in the Senate and the House. So they wanted both ways, property and persons. Well, the people in New England, so wait a minute. Virginia had 700,000 people, 200,000 slaves, 500,000 whites. He said, that's already more than 2 times the people in Delaware. We're going to be outvoted. And they were bringing them over from Africa as fast as they could kidnap them and slap them in chains and drag them over. Pretty soon we're going to be outvoted by the slaves alone. We'll never go along with that. So they sat, this was introduced in April and May 1787, and they sat and screamed at each other in Philadelphia with the white wigs and the summer heat and no air conditioning, all the way until September. People started to leave, and the United States wasn't going to happen. And so the Connecticut delegates grabbed the New England people and put them aside. They said, look, we've talked to these people, you know, and they're not very bright. So why don't we propose that each state gets 2 senators, because it's bicameral legislature we're proposing here, and 2 senators will enable us to block any mischief they come up with. And they don't understand that. And let's give them 3/5 of the slave, and let's let that count. And we'll count the slaves as property because it's not enforceable anyway. And we'll go along with that. So they proposed that as the Connecticut Compromise. The Virginians took it. And that was the Constitution of the United States. And when the Civil War was over in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, called the Reconstruction Amendments, they took back all the slave stuff. But at that point, the New England states had actually appointed, because the South was defeated and on its prostrate and in ruins, they appointed the delegates to the South. So they left the two senators from each state in place. It's not a very, you know, it was a selfish and advantage-taking thing to do. They left it there, and that, my lovelies, is the Constitution today, and that is why Hillary Clinton could win the election in 2016 by almost 3 million votes and still lose. You know, the other countries.
So to bring this forward, which is a perfect picture, and if I understand, correct me if I'm wrong always, is it basically that's just stunning information. I wished I would have had a better upbringing on. Correct me if I'm wrong. They're giving votes per state based on the number of slaves that they had at the time, but it was only 2/3 or 3/4.
3/5.
I'm sorry?
3/5.
3/5 they came up with.
That's what they agreed to.
So then it was eliminated during the Civil War.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
So basically what we have is the dysfunctionality of our country with swing states, they call them, because of their electoral college that we have in place. But we don't necessarily, by popular vote, the popular vote doesn't win. So going back to this.
Exactly, Randy. Well, the way it was left after the Civil War is they took back the slave stuff, but they kept this 2 states, 2 senators for each state, and it threw it out of whack even then, because Virginia had 8 times the number of people as Delaware, but Delaware had, so the Delaware person's vote in the Senate counted 8 times as much. Today, if you had said to them then, okay, in 1787, you know, 237 years from now, this is still going to be the Constitution, and the United States is going to be this gigantic thing, and we're going to own the Viceroy of New Spain. It's going to be a state way out on the West Coast, and it's going to have 39.5 million people, which is 17, 18 times the entire population of 13 colonies, and they're going to have 2 senators. And Wyoming, which has 547,000, 168th as much, will also have 2 senators. And that's how we're going to do the Electoral College. It's based on the number of representatives you have in Congress and the House and the Senate. It's going to throw it way off, okay? And that's what we're going to be stuck with. That's what we have today. This is a shadow, a relic of this horrendous slavery.
Always, because I know always living out in California and your passion, you grew up in Ohio, humble beginnings, and then took your talent and your family. You went westward because of taking your musical talent out there, and now you live and have dedicated your life to, you know, trying to make a difference. So my question is to you always is that I know you're passionate, more passionate to work outside what is called our government. I mean, not from a standpoint of illegality, but you feel you can get more done bringing the right focus through your music and the people to help the homeless that seemingly our, you know, congressional counterparts can't, you know, find a way to, it's everywhere. But your passion is to really be an individual that's going to, you know, shout to the mountaintop, figuratively. One guy climbs them, the other one shouts from the top. So how do you see our future going forward from your perspective always?
Well, Mr. Mills, thank you for that, man. That is some, and like I've been taking notes since you've been speaking, and I thank you for that education. And Randy, thank you for letting me chime in. I feel right now that Donald Trump is a billionaire and he's not affecting the homeless right now. So what's going to make him do something when he's back in the White House if he's not doing it now? He's not helping now. Kamala Harris is in the White House already, and she's not helping the homeless. So I feel like we have to do it on our own because they are they're the government workers. They work for us. The president is set up to work for us, and I don't see that happening right now. I don't see that happening. I feel like we have to do it on our own. So I feel like we're equipped to help the world in a situation we're in, because right now it's not being done.
Well, it isn't, and I know out in California is that if I saw it correctly,
The worst homeless in the world.
yeah. Then
We step over homeless people just to get to our job place, just to get to the Dodger game. There's homeless people everywhere. There's encampments everywhere. They called it a state of emergency a couple years ago. I can't tell it's a state of emergency because nothing's happening.
Yeah. So going forward, Robert, as our constitutional, from the historical perspective, how do you see what has happened? We see the painted picture of our existence today where everything, nothing gets done, in my opinion. The past 4 years, Biden, at least, there was a lot of plans that were enacted that, he unfroze Congress to a certain extent.
He's given more money to Ukraine in the last 2 years than he's ever given Americans.
Yeah, a lot of money's been going there because then you get into the question of we got to stop the Russian invasion, because I don't think Russia would stop if he got.
Well, Russia is Ukraine.
Yeah, well,
I mean, let's be real.
Yeah, it's that's historically. Robert, what's your perspective on all of this?
Well, I want to first point out that we tend to discuss this thing by referencing states, as if states are just a fictional abstraction. When we talk about, the California has more people than 25 other states combined, and hence we only have 2 senators, they have 50. But really, that distorts it, because what we're really talking about here is the franchise of individual voters. And what the Compromise of 1787 left us with this as legacy is it disenfranchises voters. It creates an outcome that's not democratic, where the winner isn't the winner, and it throws everything off. And I'm going to talk about the other 3 things that influence it, and they all work together. Okay, the other one is the Citizens United case, which is a Supreme Court case that threw aside all Congress restrictions on political donations. It basically legalized bribery in the United States as long as you call it a campaign contribution.
NIL.
And so what that did is it enabled these wealthy interests to go to these smaller states where it's very inexpensive to influence the election. In California, it's too expensive. So they go to the small states, and they were able to grossly and disproportionately influence the election and the electorate. Okay. The third thing that is doing it is the collapse of independent media. We tend to think that things were fair and wonderful back in the old days. They weren't. They were as bad or worse than they are now, but it was just newspapers. Then we entered into this golden age when there was national electronic media like radio and TV in the middle of the 20th century. And we had the FTC fairness rule, and we had the rise of objective journalism. And for about 60 some years, there was really fair. You cut on TV, had 3 networks. They basically covered the same thing the same way. And so America became this incredibly well-informed, well-governed country, I mean, compared to the rest of the world. And it was our golden age, but then it was taken over by Fox News and the right wing. And they have now set about, we could talk about this further, deliberate, intentional, misleading, factually wrong lies are being perpetrated as truth. And they're being bought, okay? And lastly, the big thing that's influencing things today is the collapse of our educational system. We were number one. I mean, in World War II, we educated all of our high school students to get a high school degree. Germany only did about 40% or so, and the rest of the world probably even less. But all of a sudden, we start defunding it. We decentralized it. And today, America has fallen, to 38th last. But I had the dinner party last night. People were telling me, no, we're 50th in some things. We have collapsed in terms of education, and not just in the information that is committed, but how to think. Americans don't know how to think. And what's really, really amazing to me is how we all have in our pockets, okay, the Oracle of Delphi, the great myth of the, Mount Olympus. You go up there and ask the priestess to intervene with the gods and tell you the truth. We have it right here. You can ask Siri anything. There's thousands of libraries of Congress right here. And do people ever do that? No. All you'd have to do is ask yourself,
Google
Siri, tell me the pros and cons of climate change. Tell me how it's possible to rig an election. Tell me about whether vaccines are safe or not. And back will come dozens of different, highly, and you can read it in an hour. You can become roughly conversant on these things. Yeah. But do people do that? No. And so this is all because our education system, people don't know how to think. They have no curiosity. And they don't realize they don't know anything. And so this
AI.
is down.
Yeah, AI. Then again, leaving out the fact of the internet. I went back to school about 10 years ago, and I had people tell me that we were in a rhetoric class in the Department of Communication at Northern Illinois University. And the kids are in that. The worst thing that you can be in the world is be a senior citizen going back to school, because I actually went back to try to learn something and have my communication skills. I needed to go back and I had to learn a few things. Anyway, this rhetoric class is very fascinating. And I had they asked me to lecture sometimes about life's realities after a couple of years in classes that I was taking. And I asked the instructor if we could have a challenge for the students. And what they had to do is pinpoint where Hayward, Wisconsin was. And they had to look up a group of 5 words and how to spell them correctly. And unfortunately, they had to do that with a Rand McNally map and a dictionary. Now, that was a challenge for that class, because the reason I told him, he says, this one young good college kid said, I don't need a map. I have my electronic device, my idiot machine next to me. And if I'm in Upper Wisconsin, all I have to do is Google it. And I go, well, that's good. It's all good. And as long as your battery is operational, you haven't dropped it in the lake. Or
there's a signal.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. That's the reason I picked Hayward, Wisconsin, because there one of the restaurants on lake, one of the lakes right next to Cable, has what they call the media rock, and it's about this big, and everybody goes to dinner, and there's a line out in the lawn because you can get 1 bar. Yeah, there you go. It's a little bit bigger than that rock. You can get 1 bar and make a phone call and have a signal, and that's all you got up in this huge area. In Upper Wisconsin, it's still that way today. And always, when I tell you when I'm going to be going up north, is that don't try to call me.
It's a dead zone.
Message. How many days does it go before I'm back on the planet?
Randy, that's an interesting correlate. A little off topic, but I think it'll add something here.
No, go ahead.
The point I'm trying to make is that it is off topic, but
it's on topic.
It's fundamentally is that we've raised a bunch of idiots. And if they don't even know where to find their phone, there's no critical thinking going on today. And why guys are doing podcasts, going to people in line at Trump rallies and asking them questions like, what's that big bright white thing that's up in the middle of the night? They're like, I don't know. It gets there and it disappears. I don't know what it is. Go ahead, Alwaz.
Let me jump in real quick. My daughter's a senior in high school, and she's taking a forensics class.
Yeah,
that's a forensics class.
There you go.
So things is definitely changing.
Well, she's also going to be going to Princeton, and that's a big accomplishment. Congratulations to you. But when Robert and I were growing up back in the 50s, in fact, I just saw online, there you go, proud papa, Princeton University dad. Well, can't get any better than that.
There it is.
The
There,
point
there was
back,
a rankings that came out last week, and it said that Princeton was the greatest university in the United States.
is that right? Wow. Well, there you go. Congrats. But going back to the 1950s, I just saw this come up on, again, probably Facebook or something. They had little movies of people our age, and Robert and I, we were alive in the 50s. I don't know what that means, but
Happy
they,
days.
they tested a lot of us and here's what the deal was. They tested all the kids to find the bright ones so that they would take math and science. Do you remember those tests, Robert?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And you got put into classes that you really, for me, I was put into science and math classes and all that, and probably not my good fit really for me. Mine was, probably woodworking and music or acting, drama,
Arts.
teaching, coaching, but we didn't have a choice. But going back, the point I'm trying to make with that, Robert, is this. Is you mentioned how low on the totem pole that we have gone. And that
50th.
if our country can't think, where do we go from there, Robert? I mean, you tell us what's going to happen.
Well, the things like our ranking relative to other advanced countries is what they call a leading indicator. Leading indicators tell you where you're going in the future. Lagging indicators tell you where you've been. And this is a leading indicator of our competitiveness, which has now dropped to 10th. It used to be first for years and years and years and years. And you add anything else you want in there. It presages the huge decline of the United States, economically, militarily, politically, culturally, everywhere. We're just plunging down. And we talked about this. The average pay for K through 12 teachers in Europe in Germany's double what it is here. They prioritize it. You have to have a master's in Finland to teach, and there's a line to do it because it's very prestigious and it pays a lot. And we don't have that. And we decentralized our school system. All the rest of the other countries in the world, they centralize their education systems. We've decentralized. So you have these crackpots running for the board, and then we're concerned about who uses the bathroom and whether you mention sex or, critical race theory or some nonsense. They don't care the fact that their students can't do math and don't know science and don't know history and are 20th in the world, 50th in the world. They don't care about that. They're worried about these culture war things. And so it is accelerating our decline as a nation. And it's terrifying because you can see people cannot think now.
Mr. Mills, I don't even know what bathroom to go into when I go to Whole Foods. I'm going to his, hers, or them. Which bathroom do we choose to go into nowadays? There's like 3 choices.
As long as you close the door, I mean,
They got family, they got him, her, and there, and them. So there's like 4 different choices. I got to go to the restroom, and I'm scratching my head. And I'm like, damn, which door? But go ahead.
Well, in the area when you get into these gender changes that in the world of golf. So this is a world that we spend a little bit of time in. There's been a lot of the female golfers that for qualifyings to get their card to play next year, apparently, and I've got to go back to the story, but apparently there has been some gender changing, and some of the participants that used to be men that are now women, and the female golfers are really rebelling against that. There have been teams saying, well, it's not fair in swimming.
What about the boxer in Olympics? The male boxer was trying to kill the women.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
No, it's just, it is challenges that right now, I live in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is up for grabs, 50-50. Nobody knows where this election is going to go. If I go 12 miles south, there is no chance, it's a total Democratic state being Illinois, there's no chance that hardly any change of politics going to be there, forever, now being Democratic. But Robert, do you remember back in the 50s and 60s, that used to be pretty much a Republican state?
Yeah, but Republicans were a different animal then. In 1964, when they passed the Civil Rights Act in Congress. I mean, Lyndon Johnson, who was a Texas Democrat, and there were all the big liberals were in small, what are now very Republican states. You know, like Mansfield, Fulbright in Arkansas, Mansfield in Montana, Gore in Tennessee. These were the great liberals, and Lyndon Johnson fretted. He said, "Look, have I destroyed the Democratic Party for the next generation because they're going to, you know, they're not going to want to vote for Democrats because Democrats are pro civil rights." And he was right. And the party switched sides, and the conservatives became the Republicans, and you know the pro you know civil rights and the liberals became the Democrats. It flipped right there. And so it's become much ever more exaggerated since then. And since the small states are easy to take over, they've gotten the Republicans in the small states, and it has created a situation where a small minority of Americans can control the Senate and can control the national agenda. Why we're not going to get anything done. And it isn't the president's fault. The president, no matter who elected, they can't do anything about that. They rigged this thing up in the original convention about Congress. Really, the power is all in Congress. The president doesn't have, you can't pass legislation. And so if we have a system with the whole, also another relic of the civil rights issue is the filibuster. And when you have a filibuster in the Senate, you can't get anything done because you got to get 60 votes, 61 votes. You can't get 61 votes for practically motherhood now. So it's a recipe for, you know,
disaster.
Yeah, always go ahead.
Mr. Mills and Randy, do you remember where you was at in 1968 when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated?
Yeah, I know exactly.
Okay, now he was assassinated at the when he was lobbying in Memphis for the sanitation workers.
Yes.
He was not a president, but he was assassinated. And I'm thinking about this whole year how the so-called former president Donald Trump was so-called attempted assassination. Now, do you know where you was at when John F. Kennedy was assassinated?
Absolutely.
Mr. Mills.
I was deer hunting in the mountains with my dad, you know, in a tent, you know, and we went up to the fire lookout, and the guy who was there told us, you know.
Okay, so you got your information. How fast did you get your information?
Well, I got it the morning, pretty quick to it, because he had gotten a phone call or something, and we were out in the middle of nowhere in Virginia, and just happened to go up and climb up this lookout tower, and there was a guy there, and he told us. So it went pretty instantaneously in the modern world.
Okay, and then where was you at when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, Randy?
Well, that was in 68 also, if I believe correctly, and I was in school. And wasn't that in June?
Yes.
Yeah. He was in LA when he had just won the California primary.
Yeah, I remember, because both of them, for John Kennedy, I can tell you exactly and why weren't you in junior high at that time? Because we both came from Freeport, but you must come a little bit later. But I was going to English class when John F. Kennedy got assassinated. I could put an X on the floor when we heard it. In Freeport, Illinois. But no, in my world, all three of those were big low light, but historical markers that, again, you have to also remember back at that time is that national television was really sort of coming into its own. I mean, you know, really national, you know, Walter Cronkite, certainly the day that JFK got shot, was having a hard time handling that. But it was chaotic around Bobby, but also with all three assassinations, that media was just a little bit different at the time than it is today. I mean, it was just sort of cutting its teeth. What's your thought though on that, Always? I know.
Yeah, so I wanted to bring all those up because when the two assassinations for former President Donald Trump came in instantaneously, when he was attempted, when he got his ear shot off, and then he was holding his fist up, talking about fight, 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 fight. And then when he was golfing and they had the gun in the bushes and nobody could see what was really going on. He had two so-called attempts for his life within a matter of a couple months. And we talking about historical situation with JFK, Bobby Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King, that actual factual truth. And back to your point, Mr. Mills, when you're talking about we're not thinking right now. We can hear anything. When somebody tells us something, we're going to believe it. That's the generation Z right now. If somebody tells you something, they're going to believe it. And if they Google it and see it, and if it's fake news, they're still going to believe it because it's printed.
Well, one of the greatest insight in human history that made the modern world as we know it was that of Thales in Greece 2,500 years ago. He was the founder of modern philosophy and science, and he said that the truth is reached through reason and evidence. And it was a world of everything was superstition and dictators and dogma and religion. He said, no, the truth only comes through reason and evidence. And, you know, that has really steered the modern world. It made the modern world. It's the foundation of science. And you ask people today, you know, what about truth? What's the reasoning behind that? What are the facts that support that? People say vaccines kill people. What is show me the facts. 2020 elections rigged. Where are the facts? And if you scratch the surface on that, you see that it's impossible to rig the election. And you know, 3/4 of the human beings on the earth have had a COVID shot, and it's 200 times safer than milk. And yet people don't know because they have no critical thinking, and they have abandoned reason and evidence for accepting authoritarian, you know, what, like you said, always what somebody tells you. You know, if somebody tells you something, the moon is made out of green cheese, you say, wait a minute, you know, what is the evidence of that? And there isn't any. And so but people have lost that. People have stopped asking that. I mean, that's the foundation of modern science and the modern world. And without that, we're lost.
And Mr. Mills, if you can go back to your 2 and 3 points when you first started the podcast.
Yes.
Did we get to 2 and 3?
Well, we can go through these. I mean, I think that the Citizens United case is hard at work today. Well, first of all, the compromise in 787 explains why these candidates are not in California, Texas, Florida, Illinois, New York. They're not where the people are. They're in the little states, this what they call the battleground states, okay, and in the middle states. Why are they there and not seeking the larger votes? Because you can win by millions of votes and still lose. It's based on so that shadow of that racist, you know, slavery thing is still with us. And then Citizens United is pouring money into these things, influencing them enormously, and then you have Fox News. I mean, Randy and I talked about in an earlier podcast about how, you know, every one of the Fox News
so biased.
You know, they got it online in the 2020 thing, and they started saying that Dominion voting machines were rigged and how they changed it. And every one of them knew it was a deliberate, intentional, ridiculous lie. And they said it anyway. And there were many, many other things that they said and did that were intentional lies and not true. And so Dominion sued them for defamation because Dominion was immediately put out of business by this. And as Dominion moved toward trial, Fox freaked out because they could see they didn't have any defense at all. They didn't have a single reason, not a shred of evidence to make up this thing, made it up out of whole cloth. And so in a panic at the last minute, the lawyer said, well, look, if you can tell the judge that no one would think that Fox News is a reasonable source of news, then you can eliminate one of the elements, which is reasonable to believe it. They tried that. The judge laughed them out of court. And then they could see they were going to lose big. And so they settled for $787.5 million. And the Smartmatic case is still pending, and it's going to trial next year, and they want $2 billion from Fox. So here's tangible evidence, unrebutted, admitted. Every one of those anchors went on Fox News and said, what we told you was not true, in an effort to avoid the liability. So there's proof.
Beautiful. Now, I want to break out. Did we freeze?
No, you're good.
Okay, so I feel like Donald Trump is the Hatfields, and Kamala Harris is the McCoys. My family's from West Virginia, so there was a railroad track separating the whites and the blacks. And my whole time growing up, I had to be home before dark. Anytime I was in West Virginia, I had to be home before dark. So the truth of it was that that was really a situation that really happened with my grandparents and my great grandparents, that they had to be home before dark in that area in Bolden, Holden, West Virginia. And the I feel like the divided states of America is just like when I grew up in the West Virginia situation, where you're separated by a railroad track, the blacks and the whites. And Donald Trump is got the white vote, and Kamala Harris has the black vote. There's people that's going to vote for her just because they're black. They don't even care about policy. What's your take on that?
I think that she has the majority of the black vote she had, but she doesn't have all of it, and she doesn't have, and there are black people voting for Trump, which is astonishing to me, and Hispanic people voting for Trump, and she has the great majority of women, even in Republican areas, in suburban women, she has the educated vote. And there's a huge divide in America now between the educated voters and the uneducated voters. And it's huge, as well as a sexual divide between men and women. Women greatly support Kamala, and men greatly support Trump. And so it's really skewered up things, and it's astonishing how that's divided America. And you have the other things that are driving this, of course, besides the money, is the media. I mean, you have this sewage pipe that down people's throats. People say we're in bubbles. We're not, but bubbles are transparent. We're in silos, concrete silos where people only hear. And when people only hear one point of view, as we talked about last time, when they only have one point of view, it destroys their sense of humility about the other side and about their own rightness, and perfectness. And they start thinking the other side is evil. If you only hear one point of view, and you only hear that Alwaz is a crook, and it's all you ever hear, pretty soon you're going to think he's a crook, and it justifies all kinds of things. Where if you hear from him, if we hear Alwaz say, here's what I really think, and people listen to it, they think, well, he's got a point there. And they don't start thinking that way. And we don't have that in America now. We have this one-sided thing on one side, and that's really fueling extremism and violence, is they only hear one point of view. And of course, we have our educational system, which is enormously influencing us, because people have the Oracle of Delphi in their hands, and they never use it. And that's a metaphor for something broader, because you can Google it all, and they don't ever do that.
Well, it boils down to, in this election, is that women with the set aside of the rights to have an abortion, or that particular whole topic, has now led to people dying, women dying. And the Supreme Court is now deciding on who, what, where, and when a doctor can treat a woman if she's got a reproductive problem. And I think, that is the biggest thing, in my opinion, is going to be in states quietly, where women are going to go and make those choices. And I know one thing: people don't talk in Wisconsin politics. They just don't. There's very few Harris signs, but they tell us that actually Harris is up just a couple of points. But the problem is that if you put a Harris sign out, you think you're opening yourself up to harassment, signs being destroyed, what's going to happen in the future. And Trump's rhetoric of, basically, I'm coming after those of you after I'm elected, that rhetoric that he's put out there about Adam Schiff and Pelosi and all those things he's going to do. He's going to be a dictator on day one, wants to set aside the Constitution. And where the people that have worked for him, all the past generals, not all of them, but Milley, and of course John Kelly this past week, Mattis, have all said this guy's the biggest danger to our Constitution
What,
and to our country that's ever been in place in this election. To them, you got Mike Pence, his own past vice president, whose protectorates were calling home during January 6th, didn't think they were going to survive. And
Randy,
somehow, go ahead.
what, Randy, what about the COVID tests he sent Putin, rootin', Putin, tootin'?
Well, Pooty Poots is, his lover in kind. That's his part of his cabinet, my opinion. How come in Helsinki we didn't have anybody taking notes? How come Trump just wants to give up Ukraine? There's a whole bunch of issues. And by the way, when it comes to the Afghanistan withdrawal, that particular date on the calendar was set up by the Trump administration. And that Afghanistan messed up withdrawal was living up to what Trump had set up the years before during his administration. And when you have an individual that goes on and says, let's drink bleach to cure the COVID problem. I mean, come on, if any logical person just would sit down and take a look at how crazy it is, this should be a runaway. Go ahead, Always.
That's what Mr. Mills was talking about. We're not thinking anymore. I mean, if you would, common sense would tell you not to drink bleach, but people believe in whatever the dictator's telling them to do. It's like the spook by the door. You got to be able to differentiate what's truth and what's false. And right now it's a blurred line in our politics, in our sports. I mean, we got the Yankees and the Dodgers. They're both blue, dark blue, light blue, but one's East Coast, one's West Coast. But it's all baseball. Just like live with golf, Randy. You know how that separation is.
Yeah.
And it's all over money. And just like Donald Trump, he got the biggest donors, just like Elon Musk talking about he wanted to give $1 million to these people that want to sign a petition. Why ain't he at my door? I'll take $1 million to sign that petition. I mean, who's getting this $1 million? I mean, Mr. Mills, who's getting this $1 million?
I don't think he's doing it anymore. I think the feds.
Oh yeah, they shut him down, but he was doing it as of last week.
Yeah.
But that's to Randy's point that he was talking about how you can't put a sign in your yard if it's Harris Walls.
You can put a cross still on the yard.
Cross, but you put what that shows you is that I mean, there was a bunch of articles this week about how the election workers around the country, these volunteers who, do-gooding citizens coming in to volunteer to man the polls, they're all being threatened with violence by the Trumpers. The Trumpers that's what fascism means. I don't just disagree with you. I'm going to beat you up and burn your house down if you disagree with me. But I think that underneath that, and this is sticking my nose out here, is that in 2016 a lot of people were embarrassed to say that they didn't like Hillary and were actually secretly going to vote for Trump, and so the polls were wrong because people were lying to the polls and they really secretly. And what I think is happening now is that that people secretly don't like Trump, and they are, a lot of women are not going to tell their Trump.
Yeah, but they're scared of the Bigfoot truck that's going to run them over in traffic.
Okay.
I mean, they got these trucks bigger than Bigfoot trucks, and they really going to run you off the road, and they're a convoy of them. We got them here.
There is a threatening truth that about 4 miles from where I live, they have a congregation of bikers that are all Trumpers, and they all meet in a parking lot, and they've got all their flags flying. And it used to be our American flag was a treasured item, and now it's a symbol of Trumpitis. And you sit and they're threatening. I mean, there are people that put stuff up on social media that I know as friends. I'm going like, what is wrong with you?
What is going on? I went to a football game with the Rams, and I love the Rams, but I had a big game called the Raiders, and I had to be like, go Raiders, because I was scared. There was 20 of them, and I went, go Raiders.
The original, Robert, remind me, the original part of the questions and you and I talked about prior to this podcast is this mentality where guys get into a group and they go, yeah, I believe, you believe, you believe, you
Like
believe.
the Proud Boys.
Yeah, and it's like they all have this, oh, I'll just go along with it. I call them spitwaters. Kids in third grade the teacher used to turn their back, and kids who'd have fun with bad behavior. And I honestly, guys believing in Trump, just for me, I've got two granddaughters. That if a national situation came about that they didn't have the right to have good medical treatment, where does a child go? I mean, forget just even reproductive wise, but if they're hemorrhaging or whatever as a female, they have, today periods are talked about more today than they ever were 30 years ago, because this is now an issue that is an issue for granddads, for dads, for moms, and certainly all females. Is that where do they go to get treated in these states that they have all these laws?
Well,
That's why a lot of people they see, they won't put that sign up in their yard, but when they get in the voting booth, the woman has a Trumpy husband, she's not going to tell him or let him hear her.
Yep.
And then they're going to vote for some. So we'll see if I'm right about that.
There you go.
I think there's a secret vote out there for Kamala that is not being reflected in the polls, just as there was for Trump in 2016 for the same reason. And now we're gonna find out about that. But if we support, I mean, for centuries, the U.S. has stood for the rule of law, and if you and I may disagree politically, but we're citizens, and we're united, and it stops at the water's edge, and we're all in it together, and that's the way a lot of we're losing that, and it's a horrible thing, and it's gonna, if Trump says, well, I'm going to throw all these people in jail, I'm going to, send the police. He talked about, and that's one of the things those military generals talked about, how he asked, why can't we just send the army to shoot them in the legs? I mean, and
always, you're always, what were you saying? Always, you're trying
yeah,
to
I had two situations. One was a joke. I tell people over the last 2 weeks. I went to a Ku Klux Klan rally and seen a 7'2" gentleman in a big white sheet, and I was like, man, this guy got to be like, who is this? So he lifts up the sheet, and it was Shaquille O'Neal, and he was at a Ku Klux Klan rally, and I was scared to death of him, but I didn't know if he was white or black. But when you lift the sheet up, you know who he is. The second part of this is on Thanksgiving, when Hillary Clinton was running for president, me and my wife and daughter went to the Bel Air Presbyterian big shindig for Thanksgiving. And a woman was so enthralled with the election, she forgot to put sugar in the pumpkin pie. And she got so upset with the conversation that she left and stomped out of the dinner, because we was talking about Hillary. We was voting for Hillary, and she was a Trumpster, but she was mad, Christian woman, mad that we was voting for Hillary, and she stomped out of Thanksgiving dinner and took a long walk. So I'm just saying the truth is, like you said, Mr. Mills, when you get in that voting booth, you got some strength. You don't think nobody's looking.
They're not looking, and you can vote whoever you want, and it shocks people the next day, But as Winston Churchill said, and this sort of should be the theme overarching all of this, is that democracy assures that the people can be governed no better than they deserve. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're going to get come November.
Say that it may, Mr. Mills. Can you say that one more time?
Democracy assures that the people can be governed no better than they deserve.
Yeah. Well, listen, this has been a very fast hour. One last thought about voting. Wisconsin was looked at last year as one of those states that had a lot of voter fraud. I want to tell you, it is difficult to vote in Wisconsin. I was the 8th in line last Tuesday, and you get an envelope and you get your ballot. You go to you have to sign in. They have to verify that you're registered. They have to pull it up on a computer. You go and vote. You stick your ballot into an envelope, and then they seal it, and then they at that point in time, you hand it to two people, one's a Democrat
And they
one's
blow
a
up the
Republican,
mailbox.
and they sit and seal it, and then you sign it, and then they turn it in and they put it in the box.
And
Now,
then they blow up the box.
well,
Mr.
they got both parties sitting there, both parties.
Yeah, and we're like, I don't know who blew up the box, but the box got blown up.
Yeah.
Randy, what you point out is a very critical fact here, and that is that the way we we don't do elections like other countries. We don't have a presidential election. We have 176,000 presidential elections in each precinct, where the votes are counted there by people who live there, and they are everything is done right there. And to rig the election at the election level, now you can rig it by not accepting it, but the vote itself would require getting tens of thousands of people,
Millions.
Republicans and 40% of them independents, in on a felony conspiracy to send them to jail for decades. And it ain't possible. So what you'll see people fighting over the results of it.
January 6th.
Can't fake it.
Yeah.
Hey,
Well,
hey
guys,
Mr. Mills, I got one more for you. The number 4, I wanted to make sure you kept on topic. Your number 4, could you bring us home on that number 4, please?
Number 4 was the decline of American education. And we used to be number 1, and now we're number 54 in all kinds of things: science, biology, math.
The STEM.
All these things. America is plunging down. And I was at a meeting last night, and some people were telling me, no, Robert, we're 54th. We're down in the 4th world level of people knowing things. Now that is different. That this is what people know or don't know, but that's different than the ability to think. Education is not supposed to fill you up with facts, it's supposed to also teach you how to think. How to reason. Reason and evidence is the truth. People can't think either. And so the combination of them has a nation walking around with 2,000 libraries of Congress in their pocket that they never, ever consult.
It has us number 1 in homelessness in the world. We're number 1 in homelessness.
Yeah, I know, and that is your passion, and this hour has gone way too fast. I want to thank both of you for the spirited conversation. I want everybody to go to alwayscarey.com and love always. If you have not heard that song produced and out to the world, says everything you need to know about Mr. Always Carey. He means it when it comes to helping put homes out there for the homeless, feeding the homeless, and taking care of the world. And that's a platform that is meaningful to him. Mr. Mills, I know you're going to be going climbing a mountain this week. When do you leave to go do that?
I'm leaving tomorrow morning at the crack of dawn, and I'm going out to climb Dick's Peak in Desolation Wilderness.
Are you going? Is this alone or with some people?
I got a partner who does a lot of these with me. He's coming with me this time, and we're going to go in and camp in the wilderness by a huge lake, and then get up and try to do like a 12-mile day climb and back to our base camp, and then sit around and solve all the world's problems and have.
We need that.
Bring a lot
Always,
of
I know you're going to a football game today.
Charge up. Going to the Chargers.
All right. Well, listen, this has been a great special presentation about, what people believe in just ain't so, brought to you by Robert Mills in a 10-part series. Thank you, Mr. Always Carey, for being.
And Mr. Mills, make sure you bring a lot of grapes and watermelon on that trip, man.
I actually am bringing grapes and watermelons. Thank you for reminding me of that. I'm a great grape and watermelon fan myself.
All right.
Thank you, always.
Well, we want to thank you both. This is Randy Weckerly is for the Distillery Channel Media, LLC, and Live Eco Style, LLC. And Mr. Carey, thank you for being my partner. Mr. Mills, thank you for being part of our programming and part of our family here as we go forward. This is going to be entertaining and lively. And everybody go out and vote and really do some reading and understand what critical thinking is all about. Anyway, everybody out there be safe. Randy Weckerly saying, have a great week. It's going to be meaningful.
Love always.